You don't talk about it not because you don't feel it, but because you've learned that no one really knows how to respond. When you do, that strange ache inside you, the one that appears even in moments of laughter, even in crowds, even in conversations that should feel warm, it doesn't have a clear name, but it's there, and you've gotten very good at pretending it isn't. To tell yourself you're fine, you stay busy, you stay useful, you stay normal. But deep down, there is a quiet question you keep returning to. Why do I feel unseen? Even when I'm not alone? Some people would call this loneliness, but that word is too simple, because loneliness is about absence. What you feel is something different. It is presence without recognition being there. Without being fully met, there is an old symbolic idea, sometimes referred to as the witch's wound, not in the literal sense of magic or mythology, but as a metaphor for those who feel deeply, perceive intensely, and yet learn early in life that their perception is unwelcome, misunderstood, or even feared, so they adapt, they soften their expression, they edit their truth, they become acceptable. And slowly, something inside begins to split on the outside. You function, you laugh at the right moments, you say the right things, you perform your role in the world with increasing precision, but on the inside, there is a part of you that feels exiled from expression, not because you lack voice, but because you no longer expect to be understood. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote about the danger of wearing masks for too long. At first, the mask protects you, it helps you survive social environments that don't know how to hold your depth, but eventually the mask stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like identity. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start quietly living as, "Who do I need to be so I'm not rejected?" This is where the wound begins, not in trauma alone, but in adaptation. Plato, in his allegory of the cave, described people who mistake shadows for reality. But there is another layer. Most people miss what happens to the one who starts to see differently, but is forced to stay silent. That is the real fracture, not ignorance, but enforced inner silence. You begin to notice things others don't notice. Tone shifts, emotional undercurrents, unspoken tension in rooms that everyone else calls fine. But when you try to express it, you are met with confusion or dismissal or discomfort. So you learn a subtle lesson. Not everything you perceive is safe to share, and over time, that becomes not everything you perceive is safe to feel. Dietrich Bonhoeffer warned that societies often reward conformity over truth-telling, not because truth is dangerous, but because it disrupts emotional stability. People prefer narratives that feel cohesive over truths that feel complex. And so you adapt again. You begin to filter your inner world before it ever reaches your mouth. Eventually, even before it reaches your awareness. And this is where something very subtle happens. You begin to lose contact with your own emotional immediacy. Not all at once, but in fragments. A moment of sadness appears and is immediately judged. A moment of intuition arises and is immediately questioned. A moment of anger surfaces and is immediately suppressed, until one day you realize you are no longer fully in contact with your own experience, only with its edited version, and yet life continues, work continues, relationships continue, time continues, but something essential feels muted, like living behind glass, seeing everything clearly, but not fully touching anything. Now here is the uncomfortable truth. This wound is not just about being misunderstood by others. It is about slowly becoming someone who no longer expects to be understood at all. And once that expectation disappears, you stop reaching, you stop revealing, you stop risking visibility, because invisibility feels safer than misinterpretation. But safety has a cost, and that cost is presence. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that people often choose stability over authenticity when forced to decide between the two, but what he did not fully explore is what happens psychologically when that choice becomes unconscious, when you no longer even recognize that you are choosing. You begin to live a life that is socially functional, but internally disconnected, and then something strange happens. You start to crave depth, but fear exposure. You want intimacy, but avoid visibility. You long to be seen, but only in controlled ways. This contradiction becomes the quiet tension of your inner life. But the real wound is not permanent. It is not fixed, and it is not who you are. It is a pattern of protection that once served you and now limits you. Because here is what no one tells you. The parts of you that feel most unseen are often the parts you have learned to hide first, not because they are unworthy, but because they were once met with misunderstanding or indifference. Or discomfort. So you adapted. And in doing so, you created distance from your own wholeness. But something inside you never stopped trying, never stopped reaching. Never stopped hoping for recognition that feels safe enough to receive. This is where healing begins. Not in becoming louder, not in forcing expression. Not in demanding understanding. But in slowly reversing the internal silence. In allowing yourself to notice what you feel before you judge it. To experience what arises before you edit it. To exist internally without immediate correction. At first, this feels unfamiliar, even risky, because silence has become your safety. And expression has become uncertainty. But over time, something softens. You begin to realize that being seen does not require perfection. Only presence. And that the deepest form of healing is not finally being understood by everyone. But finally no longer abandoning yourself in order to be understood. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that invisibility is not a condition placed on them by the world. It is a relationship they have unconsciously maintained with themselves. And once that realization arrives, the wound stops being fate and starts becoming choice. Not a choice made in a single moment, but a pattern slowly undone. And here is the final truth this wound reveals. You were never meant to disappear inside your own life. You were meant to participate in it fully, even when misunderstood, even when imperfect, even when uncertain, because the cost of being fully seen is vulnerability, but the cost of never being seen is absence from your own experience. And so the question is not, how do I make others understand me? The question is, what part of me am I still hiding, even when no one is asking me to? Sit with that. Not to fix it, not to solve it, but to finally notice it. because what you stop hiding, you begin to live. And what you begin to live no longer needs permission to exist.